Welcome, everyone. This is a presentation hosted by the Montview Social Justice Ministry, and our speaker is Kathy Yates from the League of Women Voters of Denver. And we're really delighted to have Kathy with us. There are only 3 state issues, but there are 13 Denver issues, and I no longer live in Denver. So this was not a task I wanted to take on. So, and she's part of the Speakers Bureau. So what we're going to do to accommodate church members who live outside of Denver, and this was the consensus of those on social justice who helped plan this, is that we're going to do the 3 state issues first and then pause for questions, and then those people can log off, and then we'll launch into the local ballot issues. So without, and if you have a question, put it in the chat. There is if you mouse over the bottom of your screen, you'll see a place that says chat. And that's where you, and I will be monitoring the chat as she's talking to see if people have questions, particularly after we get into the Denver ones. So, and Kathy, do you want to do like 3 at a time on the Denver and pause for questions?
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Okay, well, turning it over to Kathy Yates, the League of Women Voters of Denver.
Thank you very much, Peggy, and good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you. I think you all know, but it always is worth repeating. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that has worked since the 1930s in Denver and 1920 nationally to improve our systems of government and impact public policies through voter education and advocacy. And certainly our pros and cons on ballot issues falls in the realm of voter education. So I want to talk a little bit about our methodology first, which is, oopsie, sorry about that. We call together a group of volunteers to say, would you like to work on pros and cons? They volunteer. And they have a number of people they contact, including the Secretary of State, and then the list of names registered with the Secretary of State who have said that they are willing to express their opinion. Not all people contacted return the call, but we do try to have a fair representation. We also do research in the Denver Post, Denverite, and Denver Gazette, and other internet research. Our goal is to provide you with the information you need to make your decision. So we'll start, as Peggy said, with the Colorado ballot issues. Just to review our political process, I'm trying to move my, so how issues are placed on the ballot. It's either a referendum or initiative. A referendum is a proposal by the legislature, which is referred to the citizens for a vote. An initiative is a proposal for citizens who have gathered the required number of signatures. And at this point in time, it is 124,632 citizens whose signatures must be on the ballot. And those are verified to make sure there aren't duplications and they're authentic, etc. The issues may be of 2 types, amendments or propositions. The amendments are changes to the Constitution. They're referred to voters by 2/3 vote of both houses of the General Assembly, or initiated by citizens by gathering the required number of signatures. Only voters may change the Colorado Constitution. Propositions are amendments to the revised statutes, referred to voters by a majority of both houses of the General Assembly, or proposed by citizens using the initiative process. These can be changed by the legislature. So this year's ballot contains 3 issues: 1 amendment to the Colorado Constitution, which requires 55% of the vote to pass, and 2 propositions to change the Colorado revised statutes. So Amendment 78 is where we start. And that's regarding legislative authority for spending state money. It's an initiated amendment to the Colorado Constitution. The custodial money must be appropriated by the General Assembly instead of the executive branch. And then custodial money is money that is given to Colorado from outside sources, mainly federal funds. Oops, sorry. The arguments for Amendment 78, those in favor say that Amendment 78 would ensure that all state money is allocated by the legislature. And instead of allowing the governor or attorney general to spend millions or even billions of dollars on their own, Amendment 78 would help provide necessary oversight. Whether it's settlement money from lawsuits or federal stimulus funds, there should be a public hearing where elected officials get feedback from their constituents. Coloradans deserve an open process where there is transparency about how state funds are being spent. And those organizations in support are the Committee for Spending Transparency, Colorado Rising State Action, and Unite for Colorado. Those opposed to the amendment say outside entities often provide funds to the state to be used in a particular manner, and the funds ought to be spent for the intended purposes. There is no need to go through legislature since the funds can only be spent for those designated purposes. Passing through this legislation would not change the eventual outcome, but would only slow the process and would add administrative expense. And finally, the requirement to have a separate fund with earnings from that fund returned to the general fund gives the state an incentive to delay spending and denies the provider of the funds income from those funds. Organizations in opposition, there's no known organizations in opposition. Proposition 119 is Learning Enrichment and Academic Progress Program. It's a citizen initiative to amend the Colorado Revised Statutes. It raises the tax rate on marijuana by 5%, phased in from the current 15% to a 20% rate in 2024. And it diverts school trust lands revenue to raise an estimated, and I can't read it based on my screen. I'm gonna stop share for a second. Sorry about that. Well, I can't, there we go. It creates the Learning Enrichment Program and Academic Progress Program to provide out-of-school learning opportunities and enrichment opportunities to eligible children 5 to 17 years old. Parents will choose which program their children attend, but payments will go directly to the providers. Those for this organizations in support are Academic Advocates, African Leadership Group, Colorado Children's Campaign, Colorado Succeeds, Colorado Youth Congress, Latino Education Coalition, Servicios de la Raza, Transform Education Now, and Learning Opportunities for Colorado Kids. They say that LEAP helps close the gap between families that can afford enrichment opportunities for students and those who cannot. The program is a step forward, closing the gap between families who can afford to provide enrichment opportunities for their children and those who cannot. LEAP supports education needs of low-income students. This support will help make up for the loss in recent years of programs such as music, visual and performing arts, and career and technical education. And LEAP creates opportunities for teachers to earn money as program providers. It's important to note that there was confusion on this one as to whether the Colorado Education Association was in favor of this or not, but they have come out as neutral. Those opposed to the proposition include Advocates for Public Education, American Federation of Teachers, Coloradans Against School Vouchers, Colorado Alliance for Retired Americans, Colorado Democratic Latino Initiative, Colorado Energy and Environment Initiative, Colorado Democratic Education Initiative, Colorado Association of School Boards, Colorado Association of School Executives, Colorado PTA, Colorado State Parent Coalition, Working Families Party, Taxpayers for United Education, and Uniting for Kids. Those opposed to this proposition say that Proposition 119 allows public money to be directed to private out-of-school service providers instead of investing it directly into public schools to restore previously cut programs and providing additional learning opportunities for students. Public dollars set aside for education are needed to support the public education system. And although the COVID-19 pandemic has contributed to and increased the learning gap between low-income students and their middle and high-income peers, there's no requirement for parents to choose academic subject tutoring as the LEAP enrichment program. LEAP may not help address the lack of providers in rural communities. This initiative with an independent board establishes programs that compete with public schools. Because sales tax are regressive, increased marijuana sales tax will be paid disproportionately by low-income individuals, and increasing the sales tax on marijuana will further increase the gap in prices between legal marijuana and black market marijuana, pushing more individuals into the black market and hurting legitimate retail marijuana business. And our third I'm sorry, I didn't go forward on this. It does establish a new state agency, the Colorado Learning Authority, which is independent from oversight from the State Board of Education and Colorado Department of Education. The board will be, sorry about that. The board of directors of the new agency will be appointed by the governor. And Proposition 120 is the property tax assessment rate reduction and a voter-approved revenue change. It's a citizen initiative to amend the Colorado revised statutes. It lowers the property tax assessment rate for non-residential property from 29% to 26.4%, and it lowers the property tax assessment rate for residential properties. I gotta pop out of that. From 7.1% to 6.5%. It allows the state to retain $25 million per year above the Tabor cap for 5 years. The $25 million retained must be used to fund existing property tax exemptions for senior and disabled veteran property owners. There's a clarification to the effect of Proposition 120. The state legislature passed Senate Bill 23 after Proposition 120 was approved for the ballot. These changes, SB 21-293 changes property tax assessment rates for 2 years. So this only applies to multifamily property and lodging. So those, let me find my, those in support are Cut Property Taxes, Colorado Rising State Action, and Unite for Colorado. They say that Proposition 120 would cut property tax assessment rates by 9% for both residential and non-residential property. With home prices skyrocketing across Colorado, it's time to cut property taxes. And just because home values go up doesn't mean families have money to pay higher taxes. State and local governments have received $12 billion in federal stimulus funds. This makes it the perfect time to give families and small businesses a tax break. Even if Proposition 120 passes, government will have more money next year than it has this year. All this initiative would do is slow down the increase. And Proposition 120 also provides $25 million in funding for the homestead exemption, which property tax for breaks and disabled veterans. Organizations in opposition, the Colorado Education Association. Those opposed to this proposition say this would cut the revenue needed by most local entities, including cities, counties, fire and police departments, schools, and all special districts that rely on property taxes. And I'm sorry, the correction is they are neutral on this. No, this one they are opposed, sorry. It is true that rising property values have increased taxes in some places in Colorado, but there are localities where there have been little or no increase. If assessment rates decline, local entities cannot raise the mill levy without an election because of taxpayer Bill of Rights requirements. These localities would suffer a substantial loss in revenue. Organizations in opposition, oops, sorry.
There are two more bullet points
Yeah.
that I have from the ballot issues.
Go
And,
ahead.
So the other thing those opposed to Prop 120 say is that once rates are cut, Tabor requires a difficult and uncertain process to restoring those cuts. What occurred to me, because I was following along on a handout, is they're saying, oh, well, the states are getting all this rescue money, but the rescue money is temporary and this cut would be permanent. The $25 million from the state promise for compensation to local taxing districts is not guaranteed and may not occur. So that was, and are we at the end of the state ones, or
We are.
So I'm going to ask if anybody has questions. Okay, so Tony is asking, do I understand there is a court case regarding Amendment 78? Would the case impact the passage or rejection of the amendment?
Yes, our understanding is there is. And so we don't have any information regarding what would be the next step on that, but we anticipate that that would be decided. If it's not decided, then after the vote, that case would still impact the outcome. The decision made in the court case would impact the outcome.
And I believe the grounds of the case are that you can only do revenue issues that impact Tabor in even numbered years, and this is an odd numbered year.
Yes.
So as I understand it, if it passed, it could still be thrown out by the court.
Right.
But that will be after the election.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So another question from Diane, does 119 allow public funding for religious organizations and private for-profit organizations?
I do not know the answer to that, and I don't know that they have, I don't know the answer to that specifically, for sure. It's a good question.
So John is saying, does this reduction in rates only apply to multifamily? In other words, not single family?
That's
home?
right. Right.
Because actually the thing at the beginning was talking about non-residential, which would be
right. So that's this slide that I have up is this clarification that because the state legislature passed Senate Bill 21-293, and that had already been in effect, this would only impact multifamily housing property and lodging property.
And lodging would be like motels, hotels, I guess. Okay. We're going to be moving shortly to the Denver issues. And I think most of the people I recognize everybody, most of them live in Denver, but I will just say this, a brief plug. I know this stuff goes by pretty quickly, but if you go to the State League website, that's lwvcolorado.org. I think it's right on the home page. There's a place that you can click and download a PDF of the ballot issues. So this is just for those three for the state.
Yep. And if you're on here till the end, I have the exact link to three resources, and I'll just say them now. So the Denver League of Women Voters has the Denver pertinent issues for pros and cons. What Peggy just told you are for the state issues. But a really terrific resource that's from the League of Women Voters is Vote 411. And you can go to Vote 411, put in your address, and you will get all of the specific ballot issues that impact you, specific to where you live. It's a terrific resource, and even goes into, for instance, with the school board, all the candidates are listed. If they've submitted their bios, those are on there as well. So vote411.org is a terrific resource.
Okay, that seems to be all let me just check the chat one more time. Oh, a comment. Oh, single family would in essence have to shoulder more tax burden, was John's comment. And Tony says, I believe Diane's question is one of the unknowns about Prop 119, that it might be shoving money to for-profit rather than, and that I think is the opposition from some of like the school boards, is that it would be diverting money away from K-12 education. And part of it is that trust fund, right? Is there some way that if it passes, that it would impact the trust fund, which funds public education? So, okay, let's get on to the Denver ballot issues.
Okay. So as we discussed, a referendum is a proposal by the Denver City Council, which is referred to citizens for a vote. And an initiative is a proposal from citizens who have gathered the required number of valid signatures, which for Denver is 9,184. Okay. And for some reason. Okay, so these are all the issues we're going to go through. There's a lot of them, and we have about an hour, but I think you will find it's a little bit, there's a lot in the beginning, and then they get easier as we go through the referred measures. So I believe we'll be fine in our time. So initiated ordinance 300 is an amendment to the Denver Revised Municipal Code. It raises the sales tax on marijuana 1.5%, 5.5 now to 7% if passed. That's the sales tax, to create a pandemic research fund. The sales tax would go into effect January 1st, 2022. The money raised would be for research technologies to protect the public from spread of pathogens and includes pandemic preparedness and recovery. Funds would be dedicated to UC Denver. 75% of those funds would be to research on personal protection equipment, sterilization technologies, and physical space design. 25% to research public policy and planning. No more than 8% will be spent on administration. Yeah, I don't want to go forward. Those in favor say the next pandemic shouldn't catch us off guard. Funding for future pandemic preparedness at all levels of government is about the same level as it was before COVID-19. The idea that money is available for preparedness research is a myth. Research on preventing and mitigation of future pandemics will help Denver to avoid the level of both suffering and economic damage caused by COVID-19. And preparation will help Denver take charge of preparation for schools, hospitals, restaurants, and small businesses. Those opposed say that less than 25% of funds will be for public policy and planning research. This is an improper use of local tax revenues and should be done at the state and national levels. The University of Colorado did not initiate or endorse this proposal. Denver's government already received funding to combat current and future pandemics. Proponents include Denver Pandemic Fund opponents, Marijuana Industry Group. Okay. Initiated Ordinance 301 for parks and open spaces, an amendment to the Denver Revised Municipal Code. It requires approval of voters in a regularly scheduled municipal or special election is required for any commercial or residential development on land designated as a city park and land protected by a conservation easement. Approval of voters in a regularly scheduled municipal or special election is required for any partial or complete cancellation of a city-owned conservation easement, unless for the purpose of creating a new park. I believe that's, yeah. So those in favor say this citizen-initiated measure will help protect our parks and open spaces from unchecked development. The Park Hill Golf Course land is currently protected by a city-owned conservation easement, which Denver voters approved and paid for specifically to protect this green space from development. Now a developer wants to eliminate the easement to turn this space into concrete. As Denver grows, we need to preserve and protect our green spaces as they provide health and environmental benefits to the surrounding community. Under this conservation easement, the Park Hill green space can be used for recreational activities such as youth athletic fields, 3 walking trails, a running track, and an urban garden. None of this will happen if the developer is allowed to have a conservation easement removed. Denver's past visionary leaders committed to create a city within a park. As increased pollution and climate change affect our health and well-being, that vision is in jeopardy. Denver is growing and neighborhoods are becoming denser with multifamily housing and commercial buildings. People need respite from noise, pollution, and scorching streets, which makes protecting our parks and green spaces more important. A yes vote says we believe in the value of green space over concrete in our city. Those opposed say this is confusing and misleading initiative. It's not about park space, and in fact, only applies to the privately owned Park Hill Golf Course. This is an attempt to allow the city to veto the will of the diverse and historically disenfranchised surrounding Northeast Park Hill community. If this initiative passes, Northeast Park Hill's voice will be silenced and the land will remain a golf course, which is all the current easement allows, preventing the land serving the community from a public park, affordable housing, or a needed grocery store. While there are important health benefits to open space, there are equally critical health benefits to affordable housing, access to fresh foods, and job opportunities, all of which local residents have said they want for this land in a recent city survey. This is a direct attempt to make a local issue into a citywide issue at the expense of a diverse community. The passage of this initiative would set a dangerous precedent against local control for future planning processes by allowing a citywide vote on what determine what happens in a local community. The proponents are Save Open Space Denver, and the opponents are Empower Northeast Denver campaign. Initiated Ordinance 302 Conservation Easement is an amendment to the Denver Revised Municipal Code. Amend the definition of a conservation easement to apply only to those which have been approved by the State Division of Conservation and for which a Colorado state income tax credit certificate has been issued. It requires voter approval in the future for residential or commercial construction on city park land or property protected by city-owned conservation easements. It requires voter approval to extinguish a city-owned conservation easement. Park Hill Golf Course land is exempt from the requirement of voter approval for construction on property protected by a city-owned conservation easement because the easement does not meet the requirements of the new definition. So those in favor say there is a defunct golf course in the diverse Northeast Park Hill neighborhood. Local residents and neighbors and community leaders are working through a process with the city to decide what their neighborhood wants and needs for this property. This initiative ensures the local neighborhood has the power to determine the future of this property. This community lacks affordable housing, a grocery store, and open space, and we should have a say over what happens in our neighborhood and how to use this property to better our community. This initiative protects the voice of Northeast Park Hill by more clearly defining a conservation easement in Denver law. This measure doesn't change state conservation easement laws or reduce land protections. A different measure.
Let me just break in. You have the screen around 303. Are you still talking about 302?
Yep, sorry.
Conservation easement.
Somehow I did that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. A different measure on the ballot this year would give voters across the city veto power over what local residents want for their community on this property. We don't let Cherry Creek residents decide what Five Point residents needs and vice versa, and city voters shouldn't have veto power over this neighborhood. This is still what those in favor say. If this measure does not pass, it sets a dangerous precedent for citywide voters to have veto power over any local neighborhood issue. Our initiative protects local choice and local voices. Those opposed say this ballot initiative is financed and supported by a real estate developer who wants to tear up an existing perpetual conservation easement so that they can build mixed-use development on one of the last large pieces of open space that could be acquired for a city park, the 155-acre Park Hill Golf Course. This land is currently protected from their planned development by a city-owned conservation and easement. The developer, Westside Investment Partners, has launched this misleading and deliberately confusing ballot initiative for the sole purpose of undermining the city-initiated Ordinance 301. Their proposed measure dishonestly appears to be a protects parks measure by copying the exact language of proposed Initiative 301, but it deceptively includes a poison pill that redefines the term conservation under Denver law to exclude conservation easements purchased by city taxpayers for cash with no state income tax credits involved. This sleight of hand would eliminate the voter protections of Initiative 301 for the PHGC land and facilitate their plan to pave over this pristine green space for their sole profit. This is a citywide issue, and passage of this measure would be a disaster for the environment and Denver citizens and a multi-million-dollar gift to this real estate developer. Proponents are Empower Northeast Denver Campaign and opponents are Save Open Space Denver Initiated.
So I think we'll pause here for
Yep.
a few minutes for these three.
Yep.
And one thing, maybe the rest of you were following along, but as she was talking about Park Hill Golf Course, the first time I was thinking of City Park Golf Course, but Park Hill, of course, is the one that's east of Colorado and north of 32nd, I guess, Martin Luther King. So anybody that has questions, put them in the chat. In the meantime, there is one last comment from the state ones that I need to pull this up. Diane says she read a flyer by the Advocates for Public Policy, and they said, yes, it can be used for profit. So this is the money that would be raised under 119, the marijuana tax, I think.
Yep.
So
That's
now we're entertaining questions on the Denver referred ordinances 300, 301, and 302. And we're small enough if somebody just wants to unmute themselves or raise their hand. I might not see you if you raise your hand. So maybe we'll just pause a few minutes to see if anybody has a question. I can see where this is very confusing. Sounds like 301.2 is supposed to cancel out 301.
Yes, they are very confusing. And I think it's really important to read the booklet to really understand all of the aspects of it, because it's a lot to process.
Okay. It looks like nobody's chomping at the bit to ask a question. So let's go
Okay.
on to the next three.
Okay. Okay. Initiated Ordinance 303 allows the city to establish up to 4 locations on public property where camping is permitted under management and supervision of the properties agency. The city must provide running water, restroom facilities, and lighting at these designated locations using funds earmarked for the homeless population. Its amendment, it allows any person to file a complaint with the city to enforce camping ordinances. If the city does not act within 72 hours of a complaint, any person may file a civil lawsuit against the city. If the plaintiff's lawsuit is successful, they shall be awarded reasonable costs, attorney fees, and injunctive relief. Those in favor say homeless campsites in areas that do not have basic services to accommodate overnight stays pose a public health and safety emergency that affects all Denver residences and businesses. The city needs to establish sites on public property for homeless campsites that have running water, hygiene facilities, and adequate lighting. Such restricted sites can be funded with already increased taxes designated for the homeless. The city should be held legally responsible for enforcing camping laws. Those opposed say this initiative does not provide a solution to homelessness. It would set up an adversarial relationship between property owners and vulnerable citizens. It would take discretion away from police, diverting their ability to respond to violent crime. In July, the city increased its efforts to enforce camping violations by creating the Uniformed Civilian Street Enforcement Team. The cost of fighting civil lawsuits brought under this initiative would be very costly to Denver taxpayers, lessening the ability to fund housing solutions. Temporary solutions such as establishing 4 camping sites on public land does not reduce the number of unhoused people. Sanctioned camps on public property proposed under this measure would likely separate people in need of emergency outdoor shelter from their current communities and the services they need for survival and to find permanent housing. Helping people access safe, affordable housing, job opportunities, and healthcare are key to reducing homelessness. The proponents are Let's Do Better, and opponents are Denver City Council. Initiated Ordinance 304, enough taxes already. It's an amendment to the Denver Revised Municipal Code. It requires reducing total sales and use taxes from the current 4.81% to 4.5% in the future. The aggregate of sales taxes in this measure includes all sales tax rates. Tax rates, special rates, and use taxes. If in a future election, the voters of the city and county of Denver pass an additional sales and use tax that exceeds the aggregate 4.5% total, the city must adjust the existing tax levy to comply with the 4.5% total aggregate. All right. So those in favor say Garrett Flicker, who initiated the proposal, did not respond for a comment. He is quoted in the Denverite saying the proposal would provide some economic relief from regressive taxes for residents who need it the most. Enough taxes already is a registered political action committee that has recorded donations of $117,500 and expenditures of $112,298 as of September 6, 2021. They also have not responded for comment. Those opposed say that Ordinance 304 would require the immediate cut of up to $80 million from the city's budget, threatening critical services and vital employee positions. And that $80 million reduction would not be just for 1 year. It would ratchet down the city's budget for years to come, like forcing the city to look for other revenue sources, such as increased fees or property taxes to restore and maintain services. The reduction would defund essential services at a time when Denver is doing everything possible to recover from the pandemic. It would harm Denver's ability to fund road repairs, park maintenance, public safety, and fire protection. To balance its budget, the city would have to reduce funding for dedicated programs for homelessness, mental health, preschool, and college affordability that are funded through sales tax dollars previously approved by Denver voters. Passing Initiative 304 would mean fewer kids being helped by our nationally recognized Denver preschool program, fewer high school students getting to college, and fewer people getting the behavioral health support they desperately need. Proponents, enough taxes already, and opponents, no 304denver.org. If you want to pause here, Because then
Oh,
we
okay, is that's just two, I think, but.
Yep, but then we go to the
on to
referred
other.
measures.
Okay, let me check my chat. Nope, nobody's put anything in. Does anybody have any questions or comments about those two? Okay, I think we'll move on to the next one, so we can
Okay.
stay on
So
schedule.
now we'll be going into the referred measures, and it's a $450 million infrastructure bond package. And so each measure has its own allocation. So 104 million general obligation bond to fund the creation and improvement of community assets without increasing the property tax rate. It includes new libraries in both Globeville and Westwood and an expansion of the Hamden Branch Library, creating a new youth empowerment center, upgrading city buildings to meet American Disability Act standards, and the renovation of the May Bonfield Staten Theater at the Loretta Heights campus. I think that's that one. Those in favor say included in the measure are those new libraries and the projects which will fill gaps in the library system. The projects included in 2A will create an estimated 1,832 new jobs, generating an estimated wages of $116,254,299, which will accelerate the economic recovery from the pandemic. And there is no organized opposition at this time. Referred measure 2B, Denver Housing and Sheltering System bonds. It's a $38.6 million general obligation bond to increase the number of housing and sheltering facilities serving people experiencing homelessness without increasing the property tax rate. Plans include funding the purchase of the 48th Avenue shelter, which will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Funding the purchase, conversion, or construction of up to 300 motel rooms to function as shelters, and funding needed improvements to shelters that are currently operating. I think that's it. Yep. Those in favor say included in this measure, that those purchases will increase the city's capacity to help people experiencing homelessness. The projects included will create an estimated 457 new jobs, generating estimated wages of $26,100,000, which will accelerate the economic recovery of the pandemic. There's no organized opposition at this time. Measure 2C, the Denver Transportation and Mobility System bonds. A $63.3 million general obligation bond to fund 46 projects and addressing transportation safety in neighborhoods without increasing the property tax rate. Plans include funding sidewalk construction gaps in some of the 300 miles of gaps, constructing part of the 5280 urban trail in the heart of Denver, creating 16 miles of new bicycle lanes in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, and South and Central Denver neighborhoods. Those in favor say that it will build out bicycle infrastructure. The projects in 2C will create an estimated 877 new jobs, generating estimated wages of $54,746,088, which will accelerate the economic recovery of the pandemic. There's no organized opposition at this time. Any questions about those three?
Let me check my chat. You're doing such a great job of explaining. Nobody has a question, so we can continue on.
Hey, Peggy,
yeah.
I do have a question. This is Brooke.
Okay, sure.
If these measures don't increase property tax, I don't understand how they get their money.
As a bond.
So they would buy bonds or something.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
They sell bonds. So
Sell
the
bonds.
city sells
Yeah.
bonds and they have a certain amount of bonding capacity, and eventually old bonds get paid off. So then they have that capacity again to go to market.
I'm sure Eric could have explained it, but he got a phone call. So,
No, you're probably not the only one who wondered about that.
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
yeah.
I used to cover the Aurora City Council, so I had to learn about general obligation
All right.
in the 80s. So,
All right. Hasn't changed it. Thank
yeah.
Any other questions, or we'll go on to measure 2D? So
Sounds good.
2D is Denver Parks and Recreation System bonds, a $54 million general obligation bond to improve and build new playgrounds, athletic fields, a pool, and public restrooms without increasing the property tax rate. Includes constructing new parks in University Hills and 47th and Walden, reconstructing the Mestizo Curtis swimming pool, replacing courts and athletic fields in 12 parks around Denver, replacing existing playgrounds at Harvey Park, Houston Lake Park, Daly Park, and Crestmore Park. And those in favor say it will create an estimated 947 new jobs, generating estimated wages of $60,075,571, which will accelerate the economic recovery of the pandemic. Those opposed, there is no organized opposition at this time. And measure 2E is a 190 million general obligation bond. It's the National Western Center Campus Facilities Bond to build an arena and renovate the historic 1909 building without increasing the property tax rate. It includes building a new year-round mid-sized 10,000-seat arena for season events now held at the Coliseum and many other events that do not have a space. Renovation of the 1909 building as a public food market and space for the neighborhood businesses. It will provide revenue for Community Investment Fund, which will support locally driven projects desired by the residents of the neighboring communities. Those in favor say that the surrounding neighborhoods would benefit from the public food market in a food desert, as well as opportunity for local businesses to sell their products. And included in 2E is the follow through of a commitment to neighboring communities to provide revenue for Community Investment Fund. And that's from the 2015 master plan. The projects in 2E will create an estimated 3,467 new jobs, generating estimated wages of $225,566,304, which will accelerate the economic recovery from the pandemic. There is opposition on this one. Those opposed say the $190 million the city is seeking in bond money for the National Western Center project would be much better spent on affordable housing or achieving climate goals. In 2017, the city of Denver took out an Elevate Denver bond for $937 million, part of which was dedicated to improving the National Western Complex. 69% of that money remains unspent, and the city has until 2027 to find funding for the National Western from other sources, such as tourism taxes or private investment. And community members from the Globeville, Elaria, and Swansea neighborhoods surrounding the National Western Complex vehemently opposed the new developments, citing an exclusive process and lack of benefits for local residents. Referred measure 2F, Safe and Sound Denver, initiated referendum to rescind ordinance 2020-0888, approved in February 2021, which revised the Denver zoning code. This referendum would change the zoning code back to its previous rules. Only 2 unrelated adults, not 5, as was approved in February 2021, could live together in a detached house. Only 4 unrelated adults, not 5, could live together in condos, duplexes, and apartments. The congregate living consolidation to describe uses where more people are allowed in the household would be erased, along with all permitted and not permitted conditions for their approval. The residential care consolidation, which describes all facilities where care is required, would be erased, along with all the permitted and non-permitted conditions for their approval. Residential care facilities would be regulated by use, not by size. Halfway houses would only be allowed in industrial areas. And those in favor say Denver residents should have a direct say in what happens in their backyards, blocks, and neighborhoods. Safe and Sound Denver is a grassroots effort of Denver residents who advocate for the safety and well-being of our neighbors. Maintain the stability of our communities with sound policy that supports the long-term growth of Denver, and repeal the group living zoning code amendment. The sea change to Denver zoning benefits profiteers. It uses our neighborhoods in a major unproven experiment. We should have a voice and a choice about housing in our neighborhoods. City council and the mayor didn't listen. Now it's our turn. Keep Denver from becoming like Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. Those opposed say repealing the zoning change would take away the option for working families like teachers, nurses, and grocery store clerks to share housing costs with friends, coworkers, or roommates. Baseless fear mongering won't change facts. The zoning change does not allow any community corrections serving those coming from prison in single family areas, and it limits the number of residential care facilities that can operate in any one and requires them to be spaced apart. If 2F passes, it threatens to take away capacity and the ability to improve services to existing homeless shelters in the city, and to make it more expensive and difficult to serve people experiencing homelessness. Denver needs more options, not fewer, when it comes to providing affordable housing. By voting no on 2F, we can protect Coloradans affected by the fallout from the pandemic or other circumstances out of their control. Proponents are Safe and Sound Denver. Opponents are vote no on 2F, keep Denver housed. And we have just one more measure, measure 2G, which is to fill future vacancies for the independent monitor. It's amendment to the charter of the city and county of Denver. The Citizen Oversight Board would appoint the independent monitor with city council approval. The Citizen Oversight Board may remove the independent monitor with city council consultation. The independent monitor may hire and fund an independent attorney to provide legal advice. The independent monitor may hire 2 employees who will be civil service employees and will serve at the monitor's will. Oh, that's not the last one. Sorry about that. Those in favor say that currently the Civilian Oversight Board lacks sufficient authority to compel the departments to provide evidence for its investigations, nor to enforce its recommendations for disciplinary actions of the departments. Having a body that is different than the person who appoints the city heads of law enforcement appoint their watchdog is crucial for public trust. Career service employees get certain process guarantees for human resource matters such as hiring, firing, disciplining, and grievance issues. There's no organized opposition to the measure at this time. And finally, referred measure 2H, it's election day change. It's amendment to the charter of the city and county of Denver. It moves Denver municipal elections from the first Tuesday in May to the first Tuesday in April to address federal guidelines for mailing ballots to military and overseas voters. Officials would be elected by a majority of the votes cast, 50% plus 1. Oh. So those in favor say that I don't have a great in favor. Public outreach and response that include over 1,000 responses from Denver residents as presented in Clerk Lopez makes municipal election recommendations to the city council. A media release from the office of the clerk and recorder revealed that Denver residents want spring municipal elections decided by a majority vote, electing city officials. Just to say that we are currently out of compliance because of this later date. It doesn't allow, should there be a recount, or I'm sorry, a runoff for enough time for the election to occur for people who are overseas or mailing in ballots. So that, any questions about that? Those are all of our measures.
Okay, Karen asked about 2A. What will stop investors from buying up housing stock and essentially creating apartments in SF neighborhoods? I'm not sure what your abbreviation, Karen replied, without additional requirement.
Single family, that's
Single
single family
family.
neighborhoods.
Okay.
This is 2F, it's not 2A.
Oh, okay.
Which is, oh, right, the safe and sound.
What will stop them from buying up real estate?
Single
Was that-
family housing stock and creating apartments, single family neighborhoods without additional requirements usually needed to accommodate multifamily. You will have created the specter of absentee landlords replacing resident ownership in our neighborhoods. Why not require owner occupation for the privilege of allowing 5 adults with children to be in these units? Okay, so you're
think-
saying, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that is somewhat a separate question. When you're saying why not require owner occupation, that's not being considered here.
So it might, so what was passed in February by the council that this 2F is trying to overturn doesn't address owner occupation. Is
Mm-mm.
that right?
Right.
No. Just to go back on this, I understand that in February, overhaul to our ordinances took place, and they were that it needed to be taken. I mean, definitely an overhaul needed to be taken place in terms of opening up housing stock and so on. However, to have opened it up so that all neighborhoods can now become essentially multi-family neighborhoods. I mean, 6 adults plus their children in any home that they have the right to do that now, along with 6 cars plus 1. I mean, that's what's now in the ordinance is also unacceptable. And so what I'm asking is, I'm looking for where were some of the constraints that actually took into account the future of our neighborhoods when they passed things back in February of 2021. I do not see anything that would show that there is any attempt to retain some of the characteristics of our existing neighborhoods. Instead, everything was opened up for anything. And it really reminds me a bit of what Houston is like without any zoning, where you end up having, and unfortunately, I was unaware of what the city did back in February or earlier. So I was out of that scene. But that's what I'm concerned about several things when it comes to what the city did. And I understand that it's past February, so that you're not going back to change the ordinance. But unfortunately, if you don't have a reason for them to relook at the ordinance, you've now opened up Denver to some, I think, huge abuses that show absolutely no creativity in terms of other ways that you can accommodate people of low and median income, which have been tried elsewhere. And I've got other resources that I don't see any evidence that our city looked at. So anyway, deep concern for what our city is facing.
You might go back one slide, because actually I think it's the max is 5 unrelated. You're right, it says adults, so that would not include children.
It's 5 adults. Yeah, I'm sorry. We're talking about 6 cars, because every licensed driver can have a car plus 1 in every one of those single family units. That is very well spelled out when I looked at the details that the city has on their website.
Yeah, and I guess, again, our job for the league is to remain neutral. So I am not going to agree or disagree, but I will just suggest a path forward with your concerns is to engage your city council and to be talking with them about what you see happening in neighborhoods if that is of concern.
I did. Oh, does anybody else have a question or comment? Well, one thing I just, for a matter of clarification, the independent monitor, what's not mentioned in the presentation is, I think currently that individual is appointed by the mayor.
Yes.
Is that
and
right?
Yes. And
Because there was
reports,
sort of an oblique reference that the person who is also over the Department of Safety and the police chief and the fire chief, that's appointed by the mayor. And it seems like that was kind of unnecessarily muddy.
yeah, I don't know why it doesn't just say that they currently report to the mayor, appointed
Right.
to, and therefore report to the mayor. And that's what they're trying to separate out. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me see. Somebody was saying, thanks so much. Okay,
Okay.
Diana, any other questions or comments? You might put those links up again. Oh, yeah.
I'm getting to those. So
Sure.
I think everybody here is a registered voter. Is that correct? That
Yes.
we don't need to go through that.
Right.
Here are my links. So the Colorado League of Women Voters, the Denver League of Women Voters, and then national, the Vote 111 is through our National League of Women Voters. So these are 3 terrific resources for you to use.
And I think you said the candidates are on the Vote 411
411.
sites
Yes.
by county also. So
Right.
if you're in Jefferson County or Aurora or whatever.
Right. So if you put in your address, it will populate with any election issues that you are able to vote in. So if you missed that, like, oh, school board's coming up, like it's there. So you're like, oh, I got to pay attention to school board. So it will tell you everything that you are eligible to be voting for. It's an amazing tool.
So in closing, I just want to mention that we are recording this presentation. It will be, a link will be on This Week at Montview. So if you know anyone who wanted to come and couldn't, they can obtain this recording by looking in This Week or also on the montview.org website. So at this point, if there are no other questions, I'd like to thank Kathy for her time and resources. And I think you're helping us all be better prepared to fill out our ballot.
Well, it's a committee within the league. I can't take credit. It's a tremendous amount of research that our volunteers do to make sure that voters have the information they need. And I thank you for your interest in wanting to provide this. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye.